did you find Junior?
Junior? Dad?
Please, what does it always mean? This Junior?
That's his name. Henry Jones Jr.
Like Indiana.
We named the dog Indiana.
May we go home now, please?
The dog? You are named after the dog?
I got a lot of fond memories of that dog.
Indiana Jones teams up with his father to find the Holy Grail of ancient artifacts, the actual Holy Grail. Special guest Shahir Daud and Matt Kroll from the only podcast about movies join us to chat about the real threat of ninjas, Harrison Ford's broken smile, and sex-positive Nazis. Choose wisely and listen to us find out if Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade stands the test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says gladiator with a glut. Alan says as a father, blah, blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of The Test of Time. I am really excited as we wrap up our Indiana Jones trilogy. I am Alan Noah, and I've got three other people here with me today. Of course, as always, my co-host James Brief.
Hi, everyone. We have some great guests here with us, Al. I'm so excited for today's episode.
Yes, that's right. We are joined once again by our friends Shahir Daud and Matt Kroll from the only podcast about movies. Guys, welcome.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, James. Good to see you guys again. When was the last time we were here?
The last time you were on here was to talk about The Paper.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, Matt was going to pick the next movie. Was this your choice, Matt?
No! How dare us? How dare all of us? Shame for shame. That's okay.
You know what? That's my bad, and Matt, I apologize. I got really amped on this idea of doing a trilogy of episodes about Indiana Jones and having a different guest on for every episode. And I forget if you guys had mentioned Indiana Jones or something, but I thought of you guys for it. So I pulled you in, and next time we will do, what was it? You picked something.
It's going to be Cats.
That movie's only a year old, and it has not stood the test of time, my friend.
Oh, no, we have to test it. We have to make sure.
I have They Live. Was that the one you
Yeah,
requested?
I bet you it was. That sounds like me.
Okay. See, I keep a Google Doc because I'm not going to remember. There's no way. But I'm really glad that you guys are here to talk about Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So while we were emailing, Shahir, you had mentioned that you remembered seeing this movie in the theater.
Absolutely, yeah. I remember it was probably like this run where my brother would take me to movies on a Saturday night. And the three that I remember, and these are not close together, but I remember my brother waking me up one morning and saying, "Hey, this movie won Best Picture." This is not Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, by the way. But he was like, "Hey, this movie won Best Picture. Do you want to go see it tonight?" And I was like, "Okay, cool." I was like 10 years old or something at the time, and it was Dances with Wolves. So I remember very vividly going to see Dances with Wolves the night after it had won Best Picture. And then I also remember my brother taking me to Terminator 2, White Men Can't Jump, and then Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I saw Temple of Doom on VHS, and I don't believe I saw Raiders until later in life.
Interesting. So you went reverse chronological.
Yeah, I did go reverse chronological, and that might actually be my ranking as well.
Really? Interesting. Matt, what's your relationship with Indiana Jones kind of in general and Last Crusade like specifically?
So I was a Temple of Doom kid. Like,
okay,
that was my absolute jam, and I have to be honest, when I was a child, I was bored to tears with the other two movies.
Ooh,
wow.
For whatever reason, I don't know why, just the faux and rather insulting mysticism of Temple of Doom and like the ridiculousness of it all, I think it felt like a live-action cartoon, and I think I really dug that. So then I specifically remember seeing Temple of Doom first, then Raiders, and then Last Crusade, in that order. And I remember liking Raiders fine, and I remember, weirdly enough, it's funny now because this has totally changed as I've grown up, I remember that Last Crusade bored me to tears when I was a child.
Wow.
And I think it's because I have a couple theories. There's a lot more, I don't want to say adult themes because that has a weird connotation. That's not exactly what I mean in this case. It's more like there are complex adult relationships throughout this movie that I feel like familial, etc., that just sort of add on to what's going on. It's no longer a cartoon. It's not just about a thing. It's about sort of like family and I don't know, the complexities of that. And add into the fact that I did not go to church in any Catholic or Christian sort of faith. And I was just like, what is the Grail? Like from Monty Python? I'm like, okay, that movie's better. Like, so anyway, that of course has changed. I feel like Last Crusade is probably my absolute favorite as an adult because of those very reasons. I think that it bored me as a child. So I've gone all over the place. And so, yeah, out of the only 3 Indiana Jones films ever made, I would have to say that Last Crusade is my absolute favorite.
All right. James, what about you?
You know, I remember seeing this in the theater. I don't remember exactly when. It may have been with camp. And I'm actually going to skip ahead and talk about the summer of 1989. This movie came out on May 24th, 1989. It was Memorial Day weekend, so it earned $29 million over the weekend, $37 million over the 3-day Memorial Day weekend. Number one, $474 million worldwide. It was the number 1 movie of the year worldwide, but actually in America it was number 2. Can you guess what the number 1 film? Americans were obsessed with this in that summer.
Ooh, 1989. It's not Back to the Future. That's too early. It's not Ghostbusters. That's 84.
I'm going to give you a hint.
No. I got it.
Okay.
Batman.
Yes.
It is Batman, yeah.
Tim Burton Batman.
Oh, my God. In New Zealand, it was the number 1 movie of all time.
Yeah.
You know?
That was huge. Number 3 was Lethal Weapon 2. We've never done that series, Al.
Oh, I love the Lethal Weapon series.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
We did number 4. That actually won Best Picture that year. It has Dustin Hoffman in it.
Rain Man.
Rain Man, that's right.
And, you know, the irony here is that Spielberg was working on Rain Man as a project for himself at one point, but abandoned it after a while, and then Barry Levinson picked it up, right?
Yeah, that's who directed it.
Yeah.
Number 5 was a fantastic Rick Moranis film. Huge hit.
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids?
That's right. Yeah, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Number 6, this was John Travolta's first comeback after his, bad 80s.
Oh, look who's talking.
That's right. You guys are good at this.
Yeah.
Number 7 is a sequel that I didn't like.
Ghostbusters 2.
That's right. Ghostbusters 2. Yeah. Number 8, Dead Poets Society.
Oh, first movie that made me cry. I remember vividly,
Wow.
like, that was the movie that made me cry and changed everything.
Right. Number 9, this is a film starring, a huge hit starring Steve Martin, directed by Ron Howard.
Oh, it's not Parenthood.
That is Parenthood.
It is Parenthood? Yeah, okay. So we did The Paper the last time. This run of Ron Howard's, which is Splash Parenthood in the Paper, I think it is. Great run.
Yeah, it's great stuff.
The number 10 film of the year is the sequel to mine and Al's favorite, one of our favorite films of all time.
Back to the Future Part 2?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, it goes on and on. I mean, When Harry Met Sally and Uncle Buck and Field of Dreams.
Wow.
Twins. Like, this was a huge year. The Abyss, Major League, films that we've done. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, Karate Kid Part 3.
Also, so many films that have itched themselves into, like, the permanent history of cinema.
Oh,
as
yeah,
we know
Do
it,
the
right?
Right Thing.
That year was the onslaught of the independent filmmaking movement. Six Lies and Videotapes might have come out as well.
That's exactly correct. It's right here, number 48. That was Sex, Lies, and Videotape.
I'm now going to look at the website. I want to see.
But also, most importantly, coming in at number 81, perhaps the most important film of the year, we will do a 6-week deep dive, perhaps, Al, maybe 7-week. Police Academy 6.
Oh, wow.
Oh, sweet Lord Jesus, no.
I rewatched the Police Academy series last year, I think. I watched the first 3 of them. And it's really interesting because they were like VHS staples in my house that that were on repeat.
Number 3 was at our house.
The first one was a little bit darker than I remember it being. Like, the thing watching it was like, man, Steve Guttenberg, why wasn't he like a Harrison Ford type figure? Because he's so great in that movie, or in the entire series. He's like, he carries those movies with like an effortless charm.
Yeah, he had a moment. He was in Cocoon. That was a massive hit. But he
Another
just
Ron
didn't
Howard movie.
wind up having more hits. That's just what happened to him. Whereas Harrison Ford kept having movies like Last Crusade and then Air Force One, and he had a lot of misses, Harrison Ford, but he had a lot of hits in there.
Holy shit. I gotta say, number 178 for this year is American Ninja 3 Blood Hunt. And that is a film that I cannot believe made almost $1 million. And only in 140 theaters, so that's kind of crazy. That's the one where the American Ninja's mentor, if I remember correctly, gets kidnapped and they're making new cybernetic ninjas with quote-unquote steel alloy muscles.
What the actual fuck?
Yeah.
The 80s and the 90s like fooled me into believing that ninjas were a much greater threat to my security than I was led to believe.
I was very big into ninjas, specifically one Japanese actor named Shokosugi.
Three Ninjas was the one that we watched on repeat as well.
Same. But let's just go back to Last Crusade. For anyone who hasn't seen it, first off, just shame on you. But it is the third big screen outing of archaeologist Indiana Jones. And Indy's father, Henry, has long been obsessed with finding the Holy Grail, a cup that supposedly brings immortality. While searching for the Grail, Henry goes missing, and his backer, Donovan, encourages Indy to search for his lost father. Indy contacts Elsa, who is working with Donovan, but not in the way Indy thinks, because Elsa and Donovan are both Nazis. Don't you hate it when that happens?
I hate Nazis, really. I hate Nazis, Al.
Is that a controversial take in 2023?
That's very brave.
Yeah.
Well, similar to Indy. Indy says the same thing. I love when he goes, Nazis. I hate these guys.
Nazis.
But Al, tell us more about this film.
Sure. So Indy rescues his father, retrieves Henry's journal, and they team up with their old friends Sala and Marcus Brody to recover the priceless artifact. The Nazis find its resting place first, but Donovan chooses poorly and dies after drinking from a false grail. Indy, his father, and their friends leave the grail behind, riding off into the sunset together. And there's been a lot of stuff written about the making of this movie and how Temple of Doom was this dark outlier and Lucas and Spielberg wanted to kind of come back to their roots and do something that was more fun like the first movie. And so this movie really does have that kind of Raiders vibe throughout. It kind of makes Temple of Doom stand out more when you look at the trilogy as a whole, but also the fact that they cast Sean Connery as Indy's father. We talked about this in our Raiders episode, that Spielberg always wanted to direct a James Bond movie, so who is he going to get to play Indy's father? James Bond himself, even though Sean Connery was only like 12 years older than Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
Makeup and whatever, they make him look old, and it totally works.
And Harrison Ford has always been suspiciously old. I mean, how old was he when he did Last Crusade? Was he like in his late 40s, perhaps?
That seems about right, because he didn't get his start until, he was mid-30s, right?
Yeah.
He was born in 42, so when this movie came out, then he would have been 47.
Right, yeah. So, the other thing about Harrison Ford, it was the first time I knew that my mom had a crush on an actor, but it wasn't just like passing. There was details involved that she would tell me about. I remember this very vividly. She was like, he looks and acts like he doesn't know he's attractive. He's got this smile about him that is always an awkward smile. He doesn't give you like a Tom Cruise smile. He gives you a smile that's kind of broken and doesn't quite finish correctly. And she said, I love that. She was like, I'm into that. And I was like, okay. So from that point on, whenever I watch a Harrison Ford movie, in Patriot Games, Air Force One, The Fugitive, all those movies came out, I was like, that's my mom's guy.
Your mother has excellent taste.
Yeah, she does.
In interviews, he's always felt very like old and cranky.
Yeah.
Like before he was old, like in the 90s when he would be asked about like Han Solo or Indiana Jones, he would just be like, I don't want to talk about that. But I think in addition to his kind of gruffness, he always has been somewhat self-effacing and just kind of like, you know, he doesn't seem to carry himself like a movie star. Like, doesn't he live in like Wyoming or something? He seems just like not so into the whole Hollywood movie star thing.
I also love when people ask him about Star Wars and he's like, fuck off. You know, like, I don't give a shit. It's one of my favorite things when he's on Fallon and someone asks him about Chewbacca and he's like, I don't give a shit. You know?
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who loves what he does. He does love being an actor because obviously he does not need to do any of this stuff, especially some of the smaller things he's doing now, like these shrinking shows. Yeah, he's getting good money for it, but you know, I don't think he needs to do it. I think the guy loves acting. I mean, Han Solo, he was never super into, but I think he's always been into the Indiana Jones role. He was very eager to do a fourth one.
Wait, there was a fourth one? Are you talking about Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, the 1992 LucasArts point-and-click adventure game?
Fantastic game. Yes, fantastic game. I do want to plug it. You know, another plug I want to say, I know it's only halfway through. I still think you guys have the greatest title of any podcast. The only podcast about movies. We talked about it. It's a great podcast, but also just a great title. I love it.
The least amount of effort went into making that title, just so you know.
The listeners at home can decide where the asterisk lives in that title.
Yeah.
There is one. No, but thank you very much. That's very nice.
Yeah, but also Harrison Ford, he just is kind of a curmudgeon. I mean, you know, sometimes there's these people that act like they don't like being famous, but that's kind of their shtick. You know, they don't care how cool and famous they are. The only other actor I've seen that resemble him a little bit, although this actor's a little more into being famous, is Nick Offerman. You know, he's real man's man, and I think, you know, both of them kind of just would rather be woodworking than you know, being an actor and going on all these press junkets and all of that.
You know, the thing about Harrison Ford that I've never quite understood is the earring. There's just something anachronous about that earring, which just I can't quite figure out, because I think he still wears it to this day, right?
I think so. Didn't that start when he was like first dating Callista Flockhart, and then it was like the tabloid magazines of the day were like, it's a midlife crisis. He's dating a younger woman, and he got his ear pierced and all that.
The other thing about Harrison Ford is, like, yes, the smile might be awkward, but he is a devastatingly handsome dude who wears a suit well, who looks like he could be the president as well as Dr. Richard Kimball. Earring or no earring, it all plays.
Yeah.
So we've already sort of discussed how he doesn't need the money. He likes the acting. And he also says, fuck off when you talk about things like Star Wars. Why the hell do we think he's going to be playing Thunderbolt Ross in Captain America Brave New World? Like, is he trying to make sure his grandchildren's grandchildren are set?
I think that's exactly what it is.
I would just say that they came to him with a ton of money.
I agree, and I think this is just easy money, too.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, the actor, it was William Hurt.
William Hurt.
Yeah.
You know, he passed away and they had to recast the role, and Harrison Ford was available. He's doing other series right now. You know, I think the fact that he's done series, I think he realizes this really isn't that bad. It's not like going to Tunisia for, you know, for 4 months and being away from your family. I think it's kind of easy money for him. It's probably easy. It's a lot of green screen. He's used to that. I think you also do get at this age. Yeah, he doesn't need the money, but if it's going to be like, what, a week on the set and you're going to give me $10 million or something, like, sure, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, when they announced that they were going to make another Star Wars movie, the first thing that popped into my mind was like, well, they're not going to get Harrison Ford back, because for years and years and years, he was like gruff and angry and pissed off about it. And he would say that, I don't want to talk about that. I'm never going to have anything to do with that again. And then he showed up and he kept showing up. And then he started doing TV and more Indiana Jones and like Yellowstone or whatever, or the Yellowstone spinoff, maybe? I don't even know. But like, it does seem to me that he's kind of done a 180 on some of this stuff. And my guess is it's just to make sure that Harrison Ford's great grandchildren will all be super taken care of. Because why not? Like, what the hell else is he doing?
I mean, he's doing quality things. I mean, he's not doing Air Force 2, and, you know, he's not milking everything. He could get Air Force 2 made. Of course, Netflix would make that film. I think he's being discerning with it.
Well, I also think the other thing that's happened in the last 10, 15 years is that Harrison Ford has cemented himself in some way as irreplaceable to the franchises that he belongs to. Like Star Wars, tried to do a solo movie with Alden Ehrenreich, I think his name was. Yeah. And as much as I loved that guy, it became very apparent that there is only one Harrison Ford and there was no replacing him. With Indiana Jones, Shia LaBeouf was sort of brought in to kind of like take the mantle of the franchise in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And I was like, no, this ain't going to happen. Like there's nothing that works quite as well as Harrison Ford in those roles. I think the thing about him, again, that's really works for him is he doesn't exceed his grasp ever. He never takes a role that I think challenges you to think, what is Harrison Ford's personality type? Like every film is a kind of variation of what we're expecting Harrison Ford to do. And he's always successful in all of those roles. He's got that sort of natural, gruff, on-screen persona. He's got the awkward smile going. I was listening to the Rewatchables this week, which had a discussion about The Last Crusade. And, the thing they said about him in regard to Indiana Jones is you believe him as an academic as well as someone who could beat up, like henchmen on the street and, fly a plane, be called to action. And there's very few people that kind of like make that balance really, really work well.
Right.
When you say Crystal Skull, Shahir, do you mean the 2003 action-adventure film from LucasArts, Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb? Is that what you're talking about?
There is some reference to the Emperor's Tomb, I guess.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I've seen all these.
What's funny is I rewatched Crystal Skull, and I saw Crystal Skull in the theater as well, and it plays better than I remember. It's not good. Don't get me wrong. It is not good, but it plays better than I remember.
I do agree with you there. And, you were just mentioning that, they almost handed it off to Shia LaBeouf. And, just looking at what happened in the last year or two, what a shame that Hollywood didn't give Ke Huy Quan, the actor that played Short Round, the roles that he obviously could handle. Because what a great idea, coming after all these years. Short Round saves the day, and then it's handed off to him, and a bunch of adventures with him, with Indy mentoring, and they could hug again. It would be the same hug that they do in Temple of Doom, but reversed. What could have been.
Yeah, when he says, I love you, Indy, in Temple of Doom, I love it. I have been listening along to every episode that you guys have been doing on this. I think they're great, by the way.
Thank you.
There was a moment I was listening to Temple of Doom, because I know that Temple of Doom has been maligned as insensitive and culturally inappropriate. And, I think a lot darker than the other two. Although, you got to admit, Raiders of the Lost Ark has kind of a fairly dark ending to it.
Sure.
But there's a weird thing, which is in my family. So I'm Indian. I grew up in Fiji, and we all loved Temple of Doom because it was set in India. And it was like this weird thing, which is that we understood that the representation of Indians was challenging and not accurate. In a weird way, we understood that the people who made it were foolish. We sort of watched it with that context. And you guys were talking about the sort of the famous scene where they're eating monkey brains and the beetles and the eyeball soup and all that sort of stuff.
Right. Snake surprise.
Yeah, my wife and I watched that recently. We were laughing. We were like wondering if we should show that to our son, who's also Indian, obviously. There's a scene earlier when Indy arrives at the village. It's a very poor village. Their children have been taken. And there's a scene where where he says, this is more food than any of them will have in a week. And to us, that was very accurate, that. That's like the sort of thing in Indian culture. I'm sure it's in Italians and a lot of other, cultures as well, which is enormous hospitality that comes with being a person of color. When someone comes to our house, you get all the food, you're hungry, we're going to make a meal for you, right? Right then and there. And there was something about that scene where they say this is more food, and Indy kind of understands and accepts that this is the case, and he eats it graciously, that we kind of all appreciated and still remember. And then when they go to the later scene of the monkey brains and everything, it was kind of funny, the sort of opulence of it versus the poverty of it. And it is just, it kind of had cultural artifacts that I could relate to. Okay. And there's a sort of real Goonies vibe to Temple of Doom, particularly with Short Round, with Ke Huy Quan in it as well. But that really works. So I kind of loved that one. None of us were offended by it.
That's interesting to hear. Temple of Doom, you're right, is kind of usually seen as the outlier.
Yeah.
But weirdly, Temple of Doom is kind of almost the stereotype of like an Indiana Jones adventure of like you're in walls and like you press the right brick and like that's all Temple of Doom. Kind of the very beginning of Raiders.
Temple of Doom is what if Raiders' first 10 minutes was the entire movie?
Yeah.
And I think because that was so iconic, they might have gone that direction, which again, is fine. I still like Temple of Doom fine. It's just a less complex film than I thought it was when I was a child.
You know, like playing in the playground, I liked pretending I was the Hulk, and I liked walking around saying Kali Ma to everybody I knew who like walked away from me. And it was great. It was like they were badass Indians. Look, and I absolutely know the movie is problematic in terms of its representation. But there's this other thing, which is that when you're not represented on screen a lot, you know, like we obviously have Bollywood cinema as well that we can kind of watch as well. But it was like a Spielberg movie with Indians in it. So for us, it was like, oh, we got to watch our representation, and we did think it was funny. It didn't feel mean-spirited to us.
That's fair.
Well, to my family in particular. I know that there's been a lot written about the sort of malignment of it, and I think in some places they weren't even permitted to be filming in India.
Right.
But it's a complicated relationship with that particular film, just because, again, it was one of the few times that we got to see someone that looked like us on screen, and they were kind of badasses, you know? Like, we were like, yeah, it was interesting to watch.
Right.
You know, there's something I wanted to bring up. Watching the opening scene to Last Crusade with the late River Phoenix, all I could watch is, oh my God, this is Leonardo DiCaprio. Like, he could have been Titanic. He could have done all of those roles. River Phoenix was the super heartthrob when we were a kid. But, you know, the Leonardo DiCaprio, like, talented, Johnny Depp, talented heartthrob. Yeah. And he was getting all these accolades. And, like, Spielberg has picked him to be the young Indiana Jones. And he was also in Stand By Me, the breakout role. And then he overdosed. Actually, I think it was Johnny Depp's nightclub, the Viper Room.
Viper Room, yeah.
But wow, what a great scene. It's the origin, of course, of Indy's fear of snakes. But there's a little thing I forgot about it, because he's in the cave earlier, and he picks up a snake, and he's like, whatever, it's just a snake, man. And he's not afraid of snakes until he has something traumatic happen, like falling into an entire box of snakes. That is terrifying.
I like that we get to see the origin of his fear of snakes. It did occur to me, though, that like in that scene, we see the origin of his fear of snakes, and where he gets the bullwhip, and where he gets his fedora, and where he gets the infamous scar that Harrison Ford has in real life on his chin. Like, he also says it belongs in a museum a lot. Like, that's all of his origin story happened on this one day.
One afternoon.
Really, exactly. And like Lucas says that he thought about doing the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles like after this because he had so much fun doing the scene and everything. But like, even if that was a germ of a seed of an idea, like maybe save some of that for the show.
I mean, they did do the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles 92 to 94. It was 2 seasons, I think a total of 28 episodes, and then 4 like made for TV movies once it moved from ABC to like the Family Channel.
Yeah.
It's strange to think about it, but there's more Young Indiana Jones screen time, I think, than regular Indiana Jones screen time, which is a strange thought.
And I think it is canon.
Yeah.
I believe it's still canon.
Yeah.
Right, Al?
I think so. I believe that in one episode, because there were bookends with like old man Indy, like at the museum, and then he would kind of talk to whoever about like the stories from his youth. Yeah. And I believe that in one episode he refers to his daughter. So that has not been established in the movies that he has a daughter. You could say maybe he was referring to his daughter-in-law. Sometimes people like call their daughter-in-law their daughter just as a shorthand, maybe. And he had an eye patch. Old man Indy had an eye patch.
So he loses his eye in
at some point.
Dial of Destiny?
Right. Maybe that happens. Probably not. I'm guessing you don't see that in Dial of Destiny. But I don't think there is anything in there that ever conflicted from a canonical standpoint that I'm aware of.
And Alan, you're the one who's read all the books as well,
yes,
right?
Yes.
So you are well versed in the canon events.
I guess.
Indiana Jones's life.
I don't think the books are canon, though.
Oh, they're not.
I'm not sure. I mean, similarly, I don't think anything in those books conflicts with anything in the movies. Maybe in the TV show, possibly. Like, the fact that he's married and then the wife dies, like, there's nothing in the movies where they say that he wasn't married before, like it just could have not come up in conversation. I'm not really sure about the canonicalness of the show, but I remember watching it and then quickly getting bored by it because I felt like it was too educational. Like maybe I was like getting to those teen years where it's like, wait a second, this is kind of like learning. I don't know if I want to watch this show anymore. But I definitely was a fan, at least in the beginning, at least the first season. So like the twist of like Elsa being a Nazi. I've seen this movie so many times that, watching it again the other night is like, yeah, of course. Also, she looks pretty Aryan, like it's not that much of a twist, I guess. I remember when I was a kid, I was very confused about why Donovan kidnaps Henry. Like, that's not ever really explicitly explained. And, like, if you kind of think about it, Donovan needs the Grail, or Donovan wants the Grail. Henry's the expert. So why does he kidnap Henry and then have his son, who's not an expert, go looking for it? And I think I've sussed out the reason to it now, which is that Henry figured out that Elsa was a Nazi, and then he didn't want to help anymore, and he sent the journal home, and so then Donovan kidnapped him and said, okay, we'll get the next best thing. But that's not really clear in the movie, and I do remember that kind of confused me, as a kid, teenager, or whatever.
I think you have it, but just a little bit more that I think Donovan was always being funded by Nazis.
Right.
They just didn't have an expert on this, and so they got Henry Jones Sr., but once he was suspicious, he was smart enough to mail his diary.
Right. And Henry figures out that Elsa's a Nazi because she talks in her sleep. And, like, that's a funny gag, and, like, I get it. LOL, they slept together. I was kind of thinking about it, like, the other day. Like, that's a little bit weird, right? Like, what is she saying in her sleep? Like, I get it that it's a joke and you're not supposed to think about this shit, but, like, I'm a progressive. I don't talk about AOC in my sleep. Yeah, I think.
And it doesn't seem like she's a true believer. Like, you have that scene later on where they go to the book burning, and she is genuinely upset by the book burning because she is like, she can see the tides of history are not going to be favorable to what they have been doing. It's sort of a quality that I actually really like about this film, which is that a character like Elsa, who is ostensibly a key villain of the piece, is a complicated villain. Like, she is part of the Nazi movement, but she's also, it is an affront to her idea that antiquity should be preserved. I like that quality about it, about the film, which is that, like, it is complicated, the feelings that she has. And a lot of the questions that the movie raises towards the end are kind of played out through her in interesting ways, which is that, like, the search for the cup is more than just uncovering the clues. It's about having faith in the cup, or faith in the story of the cup. So I think it's interesting to see how that all plays out through her, and then through Indy, and then and also through Henry, as it turns out, because they're all kind of in a sort of a triangle throughout the movie.
Yeah, I think the actress that plays Elsa, Alison Doody, I think she does a great job. And
can I stop you right there? I'm sorry to interrupt. But after our Temple of Doom episode, my sister sent me an angry text because I mentioned that she was afraid of gremlins. So I will redeem myself in my sister's eyes and tell you that every time we watch this movie and her name came up on screen, Alison Doody, my sister would laugh for a solid 5 minutes about the fact that her name is Alison Doody. And I think my sister will appreciate that I'm telling that story. So go on, James. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Well, that was a very necessary comment.
Thank you.
So I'm glad. But that being said, I agree with you, Shahir. She's definitely complicated. She purposely kills Donovan at the end.
Yeah.
I did not figure this out when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But she purposely picks the wrong Grail and gives Indy several nods that she knows what she's doing.
Yeah, like Indy knows that it's not the Grail.
Yeah, and Donovan, he's killed, and then she's immediately like, all right, well, now that we're rid of him, it would not be made of gold.
Yeah.
And then they figure it out. So, like Henry Sr. says, like, she didn't really believe in what the Grail stood for. She just kind of wanted it as an artifact and the fortune and glory.
Yeah, but then I think the key factor in this movie as well is the father-son relationship, right?
Right.
Matt, you sort of mentioned that was complicated or not something you were into.
No, when I was a kid, I didn't get it. I didn't understand
Right.
it. I didn't care. Were they not ripping out hearts? Were they not racing around in mine cars? I didn't give a shit. But here, as an adult, when you actually I don't know, think about your relationships with your parents and with other people that get a little bit more complex, it actually has a lot of meaning. There's a lot here. There's a lot about following in sort of the footsteps of your forebearers, of your parents, and trying to either escape their shadow or follow so hard in their footsteps that you eclipse them or whatever. And it seems like that Indy's been a little bit clawing at his dad's heels, and I liked that sort of setup, especially as an adult. The Henry of it all with Elsa is interesting because you're right. Elsa does have a turn at the book burning. And then I think what actually puts her kind of over the edge to just find the thing and not go, she's only 40% not, just, whatever. Which, I don't know about that. But when Henry gets shot, that is the thing that, because they had a somewhat of a relationship, even if it was kind of a, to keep them placated or something. But I think the whole thing is a slow push about having her betray Donovan near the end.
Right.
I like the complexities of this movie because of kind of everything that everyone said so far. Every character feels much more real, more logically real, and more emotionally complex than, say, a Willy or even a Short Round.
Right.
Because I feel like Willy and Short Round, they're archetypes, they're cartoons.
Yeah.
And you can have poignant moments with cartoons and with things that are sort of one note. But I feel like all of the character relationships in this film just feel more adult and feel more complex and rewarding for you going through and watching the changes in certain characters. I just think that's something that, as I've grown older, I've appreciated more and more.
That's fair. And why do you think Elsa needs to sleep with Henry and Indiana in terms of the strategy of her spy mission?
I don't know. I mean, it feels like back in the days when this movie was made, that's kind of what the evil lady does. And it's kind of okay, cool.
I actually think it's in line with her character, which is that she's an opportunist. She sees sleeping with Henry as a way to understand what he's been studying over time. And then she sees that when Indy comes around, it's also the same opportunity, which is that he has he has the notebook, and she is an opportunist. She goes along with the march of the Nazis and wearing the swastika and that sort of thing, but she feels offended by the entire process because of the sort of the destruction of the antiquities. So I think she's an opportunist, but one that in a different scenario and maybe in different life circumstances would not be aligned with the Nazis and, would be maybe working with Indy on a mission elsewhere. I do think she sort of likes that.
Maybe. I want to make sure that her being an opportunist and her being a complex character doesn't excuse her character being a fucking Nazi. That's true, but also...
Right. Even if you're half-hearted, you're still going along with it. I was wondering if, maybe she didn't need to sleep with them and she just kind of wanted to, and maybe she was a sex-positive Nazi. I don't know if that's a thing. But I did appreciate, in the world that we live in now, seeing the book burning scene. And then Henry even has a line later where he calls it out, you Nazis should spend more time reading books instead of burning them. And, people aren't burning books right now. They're banning them.
There's some book burnings going on.
Yeah, I mean, just the fact of hey, just a friendly reminder, the people who burn books, who ban books, they are the bad guys. That was true in the 30s and the 40s and today, and it always will be. Just a friendly reminder for anyone who needed it.
But I love the father-son relationship because that to me is the reason this movie is my favorite of the bunch. I remember it when I watched it as a kid. What I love there is that Indy, this character who we've grown to love over the course of two movies, who is this sort of incredible archaeologist, adventurer. In that sequence that we're seeing of all the things that make up Indiana Jones, he's immediately put in his place by his father when he comes rushing home with the talisman.
Right.
He's like, well, you're going to have to count in Latin right now.
Right.
To put Spielberg in context at this time as well, Spielberg has had a massive run of blockbusters, one after the other. As 1989 goes, he's starting to push into that era where films like Empire of the Sun, which came before this, and Schindler's List, which will come after this, are sort of becoming a little bit more poignant to him. But the interesting thing is that he manages to find the sort of interesting psychological tenets of even the blockbuster film. So, like, I've said this before, Jurassic Park is an amazing film about parenthood.
Right.
If we just watched The Fabelmans last year, is an interesting treatise or text on his relationship with his father, and it has the kind of complexities that are interrelated with that, which is that his father is a studious man, a serious man, a person who knows his craft better than anyone and knows it better than Indy. And in many ways, I think Henry kind of sees Indy's running and jumping and not spending time in the library as sort of like foolhardy, but at the same time also manages to one-up Indy whenever he can. Right. And, there's the amazing scene in the Zeppelin where he says, we haven't spoken for 10 years. And he's like, you left just as you were getting interesting.
Right.
And it's like this amazing sequence where they're really just hashing it out. And it's really honest, and it feels real and earned. And, the movie goes out of its way to sort of set up that dynamic so that the conclusion of the movie really is an acceptance between the father and the son. It's not about the Grail. It's just this father and son kind of finding a way to accept who each other is. Like at the beginning of the movie, he calls him Junior, and then at the end of the movie, he finally accepts him as Indiana, right. Which is a beautiful, touching moment.
Right.
Named after the dog, of course.
Named after the dog.
But I think that relationship and the way it's played out is really beautiful. And in amongst that, the kind of the wham bam blockbuster of it all is still incredible to this day. I love the little details of this film. The airplane going through the tunnel, being destroyed, and then having that moment where they kind of just look over at the pilot and the pilot looks over to them and it's like, fuck.
Yeah.
Like the fact that Henry defeats an airplane with his umbrella in the tank as well. I think the tank sequence in this is thrilling to watch, and it has more turns that I think most movies have today. It's like, oh, this is this part that's going to be added to it. We're going to put the rock in here. We're going to see the guy inside with the cannon. We've got Henry inside with a pen. They've got the great gag. The pen is mightier than the sword.
Right.
And then it's topped off by like Henry finally accepting that he might have lost Indy, and he comes back.
Right.
It's a huge moment for Indy, and Henry just kind of like brushes it off, even though we know it was tragic for him as well. I think the thing that makes this work in amongst all the spectacle is how beautifully touching all those moments can be in a way that very few directors can do. And Spielberg really knows that at the heart of the story, I need to infuse these moments, and they need to be true and honest, because that's what will make this film work.
I mean, I think it's sort of like a Spielberg staple, like the father-son stories. And, E.T. is a lot about parenthood. And
an abandoned father.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And also 3 of the Indiana Jones movies have had a father-son type relationship. Like Short Round and Indy have a father-son type relationship. Obviously, this movie, Crystal Skull, tries.
Wait, Alan, by Crystal Skull, do you mean Indiana Jones and the Staff of Kings?
Matt, I am right there with you, man. I am right there with you.
Okay.
But like, of those 3 movies, this one nails it. Like, let's be honest. Like, this is the pinnacle of the father-son dynamic. And in Temple of Doom, like, there's a moment where like Short Round kind of like mimics the way Indy is kind of like sitting when he puts his head on his hands. And that's like a shot for shot thing that you see in Jaws. This is clearly an important theme for Spielberg, and it can get a little old at times, but he does. I agree with you, Shahir. He nails it. He absolutely nails it.
Yeah. Like if you look at the behind the scenes interviews as well, he believes it to be the reason to do the movie is not to do the spectacle. It's to infuse the spectacle with real emotional depth.
Right.
That's what makes Jurassic Park so good. It's what makes War of the Worlds so good. It's what makes Minority Report so good. It's what makes this so great as well.
I think you watch a movie like The Last Crusade and you look at even just the action, and I agree completely with what everyone's saying. It also makes me incredibly sad how little modern action beats mean in most films.
Yeah.
There's so much emotional resonance in a film like The Last Crusade throughout its incredible spectacle. I mean, it's probably a mix of everything. It's probably a mix of practicality versus the reasoning why things are happening. Because it's not like in any of the sequences, the tank sequence or anything like that, you think Indiana Jones is going to die.
Right.
Like, that's not what it's about. There's just something because they develop the characters enough and they make them complex and real enough where you then put them in real feeling action situations as opposed to super quick hyper cuts of action to hide that you can't do the actual thing you're doing. And it makes a lot of modern action feel far more hollow, at least I find.
I think that's fair.
And can we just talk about Robert Edison as the Grail Knight? That is a character
He's so
that
good.
Even though I didn't like this movie when I was a child, that character burned into my memory. Because up to that point, we'd seen what I would consider vaguely mystic powers from people that are living or objects, right? This is like an eternal dude who's hanging out in a cave. As a child, the fact that there was this like ever-present knight just chilling, guarding these grails, like, I don't know. And the actor did a phenomenal job. And I haven't seen him in much anything else. He did a couple other things, but nothing really huge.
It was supposed to be Laurence Olivier, but he was too old and sick and ill to do it.
Yeah.
Yep.
But this guy did a great job. Who needs Olivier anyway?
Yeah.
The whole last act where it's like the 3 tests that you have to go through to get the Grail, and then even when you're in the room with the Grail, it's about knowing what would the cup of a carpenter look like. And the quest for immortality is a futile one because it's the knight who has achieved immortality, but it can only be within this cave. Like you cannot leave the cave with the Grail, so it's a futile quest at all.
Right.
You know, it also gets into this idea that Indy and Henry are really knights searching for the Grail as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's a beautiful continuation of that story. I gotta ask though, at this point, Indiana has seen more evidence than any human being that the religious stories are 100% true in his world and universe.
Right.
Like, he would be, front and center at church or,
Right.
like on a street corner, like getting everyone to read the Bible or something at this point, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's the classic problem. Like, why was Scully from X-Files, why was she a skeptic so many years?
Right.
Yeah, it's the same thing. I do like the little references he'll say, like when he says, this is a picture of the Ark of the Covenant, and Elsa's like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure.
And then you hear the music sting from Raiders, the Ark theme.
But I mean, this is going to be shocking. I'm going to be very surprised at what everyone says. But Matt, what do you think? Does this film stand the test of time?
Not only, James, does this film stand the test of time, it makes others not.
Whoa.
Like, I just watched for the first time on a plane Extraction, the Chris Hemsworth film, which has, I would say, some phenomenal action sequences. They mean nothing. I feel like most modern day action means nothing. Even my beloved Fast and the Furious franchise, that's not meaning, that's memeing. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not the same.
There's not an ounce of family in the Fast and the Furious franchise in the same way that there is in this one movie.
But they say it so much.
Yeah.
They say it so much. It's not meaning. It's meaning. So I think that this movie is actually a really wonderful litmus test for other films and whether or not they could stand the test of time, because you put almost any modern action film up against this one and you're going to be like, if I had to pick one to stay, it's probably going to be Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So yeah, I mean, yes, the short answer, yes, it does maintain and stand the test of time.
All right. Shahir, what do you think?
It's unequivocal in how, and I guess this is what makes Spielberg, is that his movies don't date in the way, that almost any other person working in, at the scale that he does, has. I don't love The Fabelmans, by the way, as a film.
Oh, it was so bad. I hated it. I really hated it.
But it's interesting to think about what The Fabelmans is saying about Spielberg's relationship to why he makes the movies he makes.
Agreed.
And it's evident he is uniquely able to funnel his personal view on humanity into his films, even when they are of such a scale and such a franchise exercise as Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. But he's able to funnel that in. And he doesn't always get it right, like Crystal Skull, it is what it is, but it's, it doesn't play. But Last Crusade, I think Sean Connery and Indiana Jones absolutely make this what it is. And to the point where, I think we have gotten into a situation now where what we do is we evaluate the spectacle on the spectacle's terms. What this film sort of makes you realize or think about is that even if the shot of the tank falling down the cliff doesn't look that great, it doesn't matter, because what I care about is the response that Henry is going to have to seeing that tank fall down the cliff.
Yeah.
And the effects of Donovan's hair falling out doesn't look great. I think one of the other things is that the critique of this film is that it's sort of playing the old hits from Raiders as well. It's like a lot of the same devices.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter, because what makes it work is that the interactions between Henry and Indiana are so rich and real and feel earned that without a doubt it stands the test of time, and it always will. This is a movie that's going to last, that's going to outlive us all.
Yeah.
2 for 2. Al, what do you think?
Yes, of course, this movie stands the test of time. I love it for all of the reasons that Matt and Shahir, you just said. It's also, I think, very funny. Like it has a lot of like wit in it, which I appreciate. I think the funniest moment is when Indy is talking about how Brody has completely disappeared because he speaks 11 languages and knows every custom.
One of the best cuts
Yeah,
ever.
it's smash cut to him just being like, hello, does anyone speak English? Oh, my word.
He asks if anyone speaks ancient Greek. That's a great line.
I mean, it is just really, really funny. That actor, Denholm Elliott, is amazing. I love him. He's a great character. But yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful movie. I agree with you, Shahir, about the kind of playing the hits sort of vibe. And I don't think that really bothered me as a kid when it was like, yeah, I'll watch whichever movie is on Channel 11 this Sunday or whichever VHS I grab. Watching these three in a row, over the course of 3 weeks, yeah, it does feel like, all right, they're just doing Raiders again, but with a couple of little twists and tweaks here and there. But I say that as like a very light criticism because it's sort of, I think, meant to almost be cyclical. Like, this is what Indiana Jones does. He goes on these adventures. It's the Nazis. Oh no, he's got to, stop them in some way. Also, if you look at this movie as it was in fact designed to be the final Indiana Jones movie, then you're not just like being repetitive for the sake of being repetitive or because you're being unoriginal. Then it's callbacks. Then you are tying things up and you're ending things in a way that makes narrative sense. And so it doesn't really annoy you that it's a little bit familiar. I think it gets a pass. If they did 17 of these movies and every single one followed the same formula, then yes, that would be a different story. Neither here nor there about the movie standing the test of time, but there's a character named Elsa, and Henry's famous last words to Indy, so he doesn't follow Elsa, are, let it go. In a post-Frozen world, that made me chuckle as a father, yada, yada, yada. But yes, this movie absolutely 1000% stands the test of time. James, surely you agree. Please tell me you do.
Oh, absolutely. I've said this since Raiders. I think this might be my favorite of the original 3 films. There's a couple criticisms I have of it. Some of the green screen that doesn't hold up as well. But I agree with you, Shahir. It doesn't really matter. Some of the comedy, which I agree with you, Al, this is a funny film. Some of the comedy doesn't work for me. The stamp in the Venice Library never worked for me. I never thought that gag is funny. I think it works on a movie theater speaker. I don't think it works when you're holding a stamp in your hand. That joke, to me, even as a kid, didn't make sense because he's hearing the bang from somewhere else. But, there is a lot of rehashing of the first film, but this is exactly how to make callbacks to a first film, but have something totally different, because the main difference is the dad. If Henry Jones Sr. was not in this film and it was yet another indie searching for a religious artifact, it would be kind of the same thing. It could still be good. You could have fun. I've seen this all before. Nothing new, no chances. I want to say the title of this film is so good, even though in a little bit it doesn't hold up too well. I mean, they're going after the Holy Grail. I mean, it's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I mean, Crusades have, people are learning that they were not just this righteous march into the Holy Land.
Yeah, the Crusades fucking sucked.
It was not the kind of thing you would name it today. But there's some stuff in this film I just love. I do love that all of the quote-unquote miracles in this film are kind of a little bit explained scientifically.
Right, yeah.
It's not just a spirit chopping off their head, it's actually blades, and you're probably setting it off by some mechanism that's not explained. There's a quick shot that we can tell that some of the words of God, Jehovah, are propped up by pillars, so that's how some of them stand up. Although I never understood how Indy explained to Elsa and Donovan how to get past that one. That wasn't obvious.
They watch it. You can see them. They're kind of like peering in.
Oh, okay. They watched it then. All right. So the third one, you can tell it's actually like there's some sort of like transparent bridge there. And I was always thinking, the supernatural part is the part once we get into the room. But the night, it's not really immortality. It's just incredibly slow aging, because the guy's old. He's old as fuck. Yeah. And even Indiana Jones, he says earlier to Donovan, like in his office, he's like, I've heard this story. 2 of the knights come 130 years later, they come out. Like, they obviously were sitting there with the Grail and, waiting. No one came. It just makes you age extremely slowly. So I like that little thing there. I don't know if any of you have ever had the opportunity to go to the country Jordan, but the temple, that's a real place. In Jordan, there's an entire city called Petra, and an entire city is carved into that mountain. It is in a canyon, but it's really cool, and it's a great place to visit if you do have the opportunity to do it. The score is as good as always. One criticism I did notice in this film, I think there might be one too many chases in the film. I think maybe the motor chase against the Nazis where he kind of picks off the bikes one by one. The movie, it doesn't necessarily need it. It's fine. I'm just trying to find something that I can nitpick on it. But overall, yes, this film stands the test of time. But we did not do a 4-part series of this, even though 2008's Kingdom of the Crystal Skull does meet our 15-year criteria for a movie that we'll review and see if it stands up. But Al asked me, and he said, I don't want to do it. And we do have a policy, the two of us, that one person can veto any movie, which is why I'm only going to probably get one more Star Trek out of him. But for this film and this trilogy, we're going to end it at Last Crusade. We've done movies that you haven't liked, and some of those are some fun episodes. But why aren't we reviewing this film?
Okay, so I am in camp with you, Matt, where I would just like to think that Crystal Skull does not exist.
Right. When you say Crystal Skull, we're talking about Lego Indiana Jones 2, The Adventure Continues, right? From 2009.
Right.
Okay.
Just to your point, James, we do have a rule about we only do movies that are 15 years old. We also have a rule where we only do 3 episodes about any given series, and we don't do more. So if we're going to have one rule that we're going to follow, we should have another rule that we follow. Like, you can't make exceptions to one rule and not the other.
Well, first of all, I didn't know that second 3-part rule was a hard, fast rule. I'm just learning that right now.
Sure, we've never done
second
more
of
than
all,
3.
We easily could have done a 2-parter today because we did do all the Rockies.
Right.
I guess we did the Rockies in 3
We did 3 episodes and like the 4 Superman movies and the 4 Batman movies. So yes, we could have. The real reason why I didn't want to do that is because I don't want to fucking talk about Crystal Skull. I don't want to have anything to do with this movie. And you just touched on something right there, James, which is that sometimes when we do an episode about a movie that I hate, you like it. I don't know if you've said it on the podcast, but you've definitely told me in real life that your favorite episode of The Test of Time is Pearl Harbor. And when I talk about Pearl Harbor, I get real fucking angry and my fists clench and that little vein starts throbbing on the side of my forehead. And it's
that's
fun.
Great podcast content, though.
Right. And I get that.
It's great. And if you want to listen to a great episode of Test of Time, I am plugging the Pearl Harbor episode.
But just so you know, James, I did not deny you that kind of episode. I didn't. Crystal Skull doesn't make me angry like that. So just for context, when they announced a 4th Indiana Jones movie, I was on top of the world. I was giddy. I mean, I was thrilled in a way that I cannot put into words. I was so excited. I read every interview. I watched every clip. When the teaser came out, when the trailer came out, I sat in my office. Me and my buddy Mark Laux, we went over that trailer frame by frame, looking for every clue, every Easter egg. I could not have been more excited for a 4th Indiana Jones movie. Like, I love these movies. There's going to be a 4th one? Are you kidding me? This is the most amazing thing ever. James, I saw that movie in the theater with you. We saw it together in Queens at the Whitestone Cinema. I live nearby. I invited our friends Darren and Mailer over to our apartment. My wife and I, we had the guys over. We watched all 3 of the original trilogy. We had pizza. We had snacks. I think you were busy working or something, James. You joined us at the theater. So we saw all 4 movies that day. I was that fucking excited for Crystal Skull. And from the second the Paramount logo dissolved into an anthill, I was like, what the fuck is this? And for 2.5 hours, and after we left that theater, I was not angry. I was not mad. I was disappointed. And as a father, I know that's the most cutting thing you can say. But honestly, like, that movie doesn't make me angry. It doesn't piss me off. It doesn't fill me with rage. It doesn't make the vein in my forehead throb. It just makes me sad. It makes me really, really sad. And if we had done an episode about it, I wouldn't be like ranting and raving like a lunatic. I just would have been like, yeah, I don't know. It's awful. I don't know why they did any of it.
I would have loved hearing that for an hour, but I also think it is a shame that you're not even willing to see if the movie has changed at all in 15 years. But you don't want to see it. I respect it.
Like I said, I watched it before this episode, and it's not as bad as I remember it being.
Okay.
But it is not a good movie. And I recall my friend Andrew Bertel, when we went and saw it in New Zealand, at the end of it, he walked out and he was just like, well, that just happened. It was, like that kind of feeling about it. It was like, well, it happened. I don't have nothing to say about it, but it certainly happened.
We're talking about Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine, the 1999 LucasArts game, right?
I did play that game, and that was Lucasfilm's or LucasArts' attempt to rip off Tomb Raider, and unsuccessfully. But I will say about the Crystal Skull, the trailer, because I used to watch it, I do remember watching it and being very excited about it, because that had such a great ending to the trailer. Shia LaBeouf goes, "You're an archaeologist?"
No, you're a professor. Aren't you a professor?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's that. I think he goes, "You're a professor? Part-time." And then it said, dun, 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 and Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. It was a fantastic trailer for what it's worth. And I would have liked to see it again. I did not watch it specifically for this podcast. But I would have liked to have seen it, just to have seen, especially after the last 3, to have gone, that's why they made those decisions, but maybe that's where it didn't work.
You've inspired me. I think I will go back and watch Indiana Jones and His Desktop Adventures, the 1996 Windows game that I feel like I really missed some canon points there. I'm going to go back.
I did have that game as well. And that's a game that kind of randomized itself and tried to tell you that there's like 10,000 ways to play, but it was basically the same game over and over. But it was fun.
Look, I have not seen Crystal Skull since that day in the theater 15 years ago. I was actually planning to rewatch it last Friday night. I didn't because he's fine. He's okay. He's upstairs resting right now. That night, my dog escaped from the backyard, ran into traffic, got hit by a car, and I spent that night in the emergency animal hospital. Again, he's fine. He's okay. Hashtag prayers for Copper. He's all right. But I will say this. You want me to say something nice about Crystal Skull? I would have rather sat down on the couch and watched that movie than watch my dog get hit by a car. That's about as nice of a thing as I can say about that movie.
High praise.
Really, I think that is true. I mean that very literally. I can't think of any other nice thing to say about it. But Matt and Shahir, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming back to talk about Last Crusade and all things indie and all of his video game adventures.
Yeah, there's 3 films and a bunch of video games that have middling quality depending on what you're doing. Some are great, some are terrible. Yeah.
And the books. Don't forget the books. And the Young Indiana Jones.
The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. Yep, absolutely. And I'm really looking forward to the 4th live-action Harrison Ford film. I think it'll be an interesting watch.
We haven't decided if we're doing Dial of Destiny, right? We haven't actually made a call on whether we're going to do it on our show.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this has got me primed. I've always wanted another film after Last Crusade, and I feel like this could be that film.
The only thing going for it right now is James Mangold, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I will say 4th film, 5th film, I'm glad they exist, but if they weren't made, the final shot of Last Crusade is almost the perfect way to end any series. It is a masterclass, literally riding off into the sunset.
Yeah.
Horizon's at the top, is that right? Or is the horizon at the bottom? I forget.
The horizon is at the bottom of the frame.
Yeah, so it's interesting.
Yes, exactly. I understood that Fableman's reference. And the movie's called The Last Crusade, and it was the end. It was the perfect ending. It is an amazing way to end the Indiana Jones cinematic universe. But let's just give another plug for the only podcast about movies. Where can you find that show?
Oh, I mean, you can find it wherever fine podcasts are distributed. You can search for the only podcast about movies, or you can go to onlymoviepodcast.com. That has the links to everything. I mean, I'm going to do some hardcore plugging right now. You can also, if you want to listen to it ad-free, we have ads now.
Nice.
I know, we've done like 4 ads. You could go listen to it over on Nebula. Use the, I think, promo code TOPAM, I think is a thing. Go listen over there ad-free, along with a bunch of other good content. Where else? Oh, Only Movie Pod on Twitter.
Yep, we're usually pretty active on Twitter.
Yeah.
Talk to us. We'll talk back at you.
You might not like what we say.
That's where we first connected, was on Twitter.
That's right. And now look at Twitter.
Right? Everything's going great there.
We got to get on Blue Sky, but I don't know. We'll see if that even works.
If you're rooting for the Nazis in this movie and you think they got a bad rap, hang out on Twitter. You'll love it. It's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys again for joining us. Next time, Matt, They Live, you got it.
And in 13 years, 12 years, whatever it has to be, cats.
Okay. All right. I mean, it can't be worse than Crystal Skull, I am sure.
Wait, do you mean Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the graphic adventure released for PC in 1989?
Yes, that is in fact what
great.
I meant. Yes, that is it.
I am learning there were a lot of video games. I'm very curious to go check them out now.
Really?
Some of them are really good. The later it gets, the worse they get, but some are really good.
I hope there's like a Sierra point and click style Indiana Jones.
There is. That's Fate of Atlantis.
So it's Fate of Atlantis, and I believe Infernal Machine is also
Infernal Machine was Tomb Raider.
Oh, that was then they did another
there was
one.
Last Crusade. Yeah, Last Crusade was point and click as well.
Staff of Kings might have gone back to it. There's one other one they
Maybe.
went back
There might
to
be.
it. Yeah.
Right.
Anyway,
But Fate of Atlantis was fantastic.
Yeah.
Great story, great clicking.
Great clicking. Would click again.
All right. Well, thank you again, Shahir. Thank you again, Matt. This has been awesome. That's going to do it for us this week. Next week, we're talking about a movie that you picked, James, called Blank Check. What on earth have you roped me into?
I want to get it before it's taken off Disney Plus, and we'll talk about that next week.
Okay.
I vaguely remember a kid with a backwards cap on the poster of the Blank Check movie.
Oh yeah, it's not just any kid. It's a super 90s kid, and he's the youngest brother, Andrew, from Family Ties.
I remember loving that movie as a child. I couldn't tell you a thing about it.
Well, we'll have to listen to our episode next week to hear us talk about it. Until then, we are at Test of Time Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We want to hear what you guys think about indie. Any indie movie, any indie game, anything indie related. What did you think about The Last Crusade? Let us know. You can also email us. We are the Test of Time Podcast at gmail.com. And we will see you next time, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
I wave like it's video.